Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon as we embark on our last virtual sharing practice session for 25-26, sorry. So I would say 26-27, 25-26. We are planning for 26-27, so please hopefully you'll be able to join us for that next year.
Hi, I'm Leanne Gentles and I'm from Glasgow Clyde College, and I have my background is in early years, so I'm a early years lecturer here in Cardonald campus. So just a wee overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the Next Gen qualification that we have been piloting for this is our 4th year of pilot. So I've got a wee bit of the overview of the time development, a bit of overview on the HNC Next Gen and how we've incorporated meta skills throughout the qualification. So the timeline started away back in November 21, where the discussions in consultation with the QDT were started. I wasn't involved at that point, and I got involved round about just kind of in between the second and third little box there when I was invited to be one of the writers for the Next Gen qualification. So I was writing one of the units along with another member of staff from another college. So when we get the brief to write the qualification, we got told that meta skills were to be embedded. At that point, I was like, what is meta skills? I didn't know what meta skills were. So we were given a wee training session with SQA at that point, and when we went on it, we were like, well, meta skills are just what we do. It's not anything new to us. So we done a wee bit of training on it, and then we then went on to write the units. So once the units were written, we were one of the pilot centres at Glasgow Clyde, along with South Lanarkshire. So there's 2 pilot centres, and we have been running the Next Gen for the last 4 years. So that's taken us up to when it was fully validated in November 24. So now this year it's been rolled out across all our campuses. Previously it was only done in Langside, so it's now rolled out to all our campuses, and hopefully come August all the other colleges will be on board with the Next Gen, and the old HNC will be no more. So that's just a wee kind of bit of the timeline. The qualification is a level 7 qualification, and it's standalone and it's worth 15 SQA credits. The difference between the original HNC and the new HNC is that the units are larger, and there's only 4 of them. So typically we would have 12 units for the typical HNC, but the new HNC it's only 4, but they're huge units and they're taken up throughout the full academic year. So previously we would have had 4 units, then we would have had like all the assessments for those 4 units, and the students would have forgotten about those. Then we'd go on to the next 4 units, and we'd have the assessments at the end of the next 12 weeks, and then the students would forget about them, and then it would be the last 4. But the difference with HN Next Gen is all 4 units are running, they're huge, and they run throughout the full year. So we feel as if the learning's a lot better and it's sustained throughout the full year. We're talking about the same things throughout the full year, and they're not really kind of forgetting. We did find that if we did like leadership at the start, by the time it got to the end and you were asking them to reflect on leadership in the graded unit, they'd forgotten what they'd done. So that I think that's a good point from the Next Gen, is that it's sustained throughout the full year. And meta skills are embedded throughout all the units. So the units that we teach are developing reflective practice, health, safeguarding, welfare and rights, and pedagogy, and then additional support needs. So that's our core units, and then we also have an optional unit, which is the outdoor learning and sustainability unit, and that's the one that I was one of the co-writers for. So meta skills are embedded in all units, along with sustainability. So alongside those units, the core units that we teach, they also do the 3 SVQ units. They're done by an SVQ assessor, and the SVQ assessor goes out to placement and visits our students. Some other colleges are doing that differently, and they've got the SVQ incorporated. We haven't got that. We've got separate SVQ assessors. So moving on to meta skills. Throughout the HNC course, the learners develop meta skills to enhance employability in the childhood practice setting. And these are just a couple of little quotes about what meta skills are. So they're also known as meta abilities or meta competencies, and are cognitive skills that translate across projects, roles, and industries. And meta skills allow us to prepare for the future, adapt to change, and help us to develop other skills more easily. So when I went on the training initially, we this was kind of what we got told. So your meta skills are split up into 3 sections. So you've got your self-management, your social intelligence, and your innovation. And under each of those, we had the focusing, integrity, and adapting. Then your communicating, feeling, and collaborating and leading. And then your critical thinking, sense making, creativity, and curiosity. And I don't know if you can see behind me, we have a meta skills wall, so I'm going to go on and tell you a wee bit about what we have done, and we've adapted each year with our kind of input to meta skills. The HNC courses include the development meta skills part of their core content, and the idea is for employers, lecturers, and training providers have always supported the learners to develop meta skills. It's just that we haven't used the term meta skills, so it's just different terminology, and it's just getting our learners used to using those words. But we always have done everything. We've always encouraged them to have good communication skills, to have good initiative. So it's things that we've already done, but it's just using the different terminology. And by formally including meta skills now, we can make this support much more visible, and learners will be able to actively develop and articulate their career-ready skills whenever, whatever their future pathways. So a wee bit from the start. So what we do each year is we start off with looking at each meta skill individually. So we ask our students to come up with a mind map for each meta skill. So they do a wee bit of research into what does curiosity mean to you? What does curiosity mean in the context of placement of college? But not only that, in their private life or in their part-time jobs, because these are all transferable skills. So we make sure the students are aware that we're not just talking about meta skills when you're in placement and when you're in college. They're skills that you're using all the time. So we get the students to do a mind map for each meta skill, and then that mind map, they get the chance to add to that throughout the year and refer to it. So we're now adding that to our meta skills wall, so that each time, if they're a wee bit like stuck at ideas under curiosity, they'll go back and look at the mind map. So there's just a wee couple of examples of some of the information that they've put. So for initiative, I'm not sure if you can make it out very well, but it's got like trusting your abilities, good decision making, using careful thoughts, thinking on the spot. So we had got the students to think about, what does initiative look like if you're in placement? So an example that I would give would say, well, if you're in placement for 3 weeks and every day at 10:30, a member of staff clears one of the tables to set up for snack, then after a couple of times of you seeing that at that time, you should be able to take the initiative to say, right, I know it's coming up to snack time, I'm going to go and do that without having to be asked. So we expect the students to be able to use their own initiative. So they come up with the mind maps for every meta skill, and then we do add to them throughout the year. At the very beginning, before we even look at doing their wall display, we get the students to look at their own the meta skills and kind of come up with a baseline. So they look at the meta skills and they see where their strengths are. A lot of the students might struggle with certain ones. So for example, leading, we've got some students that are really quiet and shy, and they can recognise that leading is not their strength. So we then get them to come up with a plan. So they come up with a plan on how they can work on developing their leadership skills throughout the year. So they do a wee baseline assessment, they look at all different meta skills, and they pick one from each section. So one under social intelligence, one under innovation, and one under self-management. And they pick that as what they want to develop throughout the year. They're obviously still developing all of the other meta skills holistically throughout the course, but we have 3 set plans. And then they'll come up with a plan, and then we revisit that plan round about halfway through the course, and they'll then reflect on it and decide, have they made progress in it, or do they still need to work on it? If they feel as if they've made a really good bit of progress and they maybe think there's another meta skill that they would want to make more progress in, they'll change their goal. Some students might think, no, I still have more progress, and they'll just keep working on it. So they reflect on it halfway through the year, and then they reflect on it again at the very, very end of the year. And the hope is that they would have developed it, developed that skill and shown progression. So that's their self-evaluation. They all do that individually. We've actually, today was the day that they've done their final one in college this morning. So I'll be interested to have a wee read at the reflections later when I start marking. So back to our wall. So I've given you a little example. I know they're tiny pictures, so it's not the best to see. So what I have done each year, I've said to the students, we are going to have a wall display that's going to be up for the full year, that's going to be interactive, and we would be expecting you to be adding to that wall display throughout the year as you feel as if you've made a development in a specific meta skill. So every year I've said to the students, let's have a vote. What ideas can we have come up with? So they come up with lots of different ideas, and then we make it a vote on the board, and then they whatever has the most votes becomes the winner. So the first year it was kites they decided they were doing. So I then stood at the front of the class and I said, right, okay, you've just chosen kites and you're going to put all your meta skills on the bows. Off you go, and I leave them to it. It's the hardest part of my job, I kid you not, because I'm a pure perfectionist and I cannot cope with when things are not even and things like that. So every single year since I've started it, I've stood back and I've let them go, and it's been an absolute disaster. There's not one year that it's not been taken down. So this is the 4th year and it's been taken down. And the reason for that is the first year, I kid you not, it was like 3-year-olds had put it together. We had kites this size, and then we had kites, massive kites. Then we had bows bigger than the kites, and it just looked an absolute disaster. So when it was up on the wall and I just stood and I was like, oh my goodness. And I'm having to train my face not to show that it's really bad. So I said to the students, right, let's reflect on it. What do you think? And thankfully, one of the students went, that's an absolute riot. And I was like, I think you could probably do better. And so then we reflected on, right, what happened? How did it not go the way you wanted to go? And it turned out there was no leadership skills. There was nobody took the lead. There was no communication. There was somebody making kites that were 4 foot long and somebody making kites that were 4 centimetres long. So they discovered that, yeah, we needed someone to take the lead. We needed a template for the size of kites. So then we ripped all the wall down, and then they started again, and they come up with that. And every year it's been the same. There's not been one year that it's been done without having to change it, because it's been a disaster. So, but they've used that as a reflection, and I think it's worked really well. The good thing about having the wall display is that as a member of staff throughout the year, I can just glance up at the display and I can look at it and think, oh, I know my students are really good at communication, because we've got millions, like, I don't know if that's behind me just now, it is. We've got lots of wee raindrops under our Clyde for communication, but there's maybe only a few under focusing. So I can look at a glance and I can see where I think our students are struggling and where they're really excelling. So I feel as if it's a really good resource. I don't know how other departments could potentially put that into practice, but I did speak to sports, because they were going to be doing Next Gen last year, and they had asked how we'd incorporated it, and I spoke to sports, and it turns out this year that they've done a display and they've used dumbbells and they've all added weights to it. So they've taken our idea and they've just adapted it to their industry. And these are just little examples of, that was the year with the trees and the leaves, of the kinds of things that they're putting in their development. So this was under leading my partner in a group assessment, voiced her stress about doing the work and that her laptop difficulties. I took the lead and supported her to do the research and created the PowerPoint. We passed the assessment as a result of this. So she took the lead because the other person's laptop had broken. Some critical thinking. This week in placement, I was able to improve my critical thinking skills while doing risk assessments by observing, having knowledge and being able to gather information from my co-workers and mentor. I was able to work out a safety plan for my room and garden area. So these are little examples of the things that they're writing on, whether it's the raindrops, the leaves, the kites, whatever the wall display is for that year. And they add to it throughout the years. Another one there for adapting, but I'll leave it. You can read it if you get the slides back rather than sit and reading them all out to you. So I was approached by, it's not SQ now, I can't remember.
Qualifications Scotland.
QS. I know it doesn't have the same ring to it, but anyway, I was approached by them anyway and asked, because I had been posting things on LinkedIn, and asked if I could share what we've been doing. So this is just a little QR code, and it's a document that I've written for, it was SQ at the time when I wrote it, and it's just meta skills in practice. So it's just a wee overview of what I've just told you if you wanted to scan the QR code. I've just got another couple of wee bits. Just the next gen has different way of assessing now. So previously you would have had your 4 units and 4 assessments for that units, but now all the assessments all integrated. So for my next wee slide, I've just got an example of some of the assessments. So we do the development log. So they're doing their start off kind of reflection, then their midpoint, then their end point. We do PowerPoints, a journal, risk assessments. There's lots of professional discussions, which is really good because I think sometimes students can hide behind essays and you're not entirely sure where they work a lot of the time, but you can't hide behind a discussion. So if they don't know their stuff, that will come out in a discussion. Lots of group presentations. So it's just a different way of assessing, and it's assessed throughout the year holistically. So we've done like a digital literacy recording, but it might cover a few of the different units. And every single assessment, we expect them to have mentioned meta skills in it as well. The academic poster is something that we've been doing for the last couple of years as well. And that's been really good because students haven't really had the chance to use what we use, like Publisher or and I've got a wee example of an academic poster for this year, which I thought was amazing. So we were blown away with this one. It's actually up on our wall just now. I got it blown up, but I thought that looked like something that was like professional that you would go in and look at in like a nursery or on I don't know, in your community centre or something. I thought it looked really professional. So the meta skills that were developed doing that alone were amazing. So when they've done their academic posters, they then come back in and they reflect on them. So every assessment that they do, they're reflecting on their meta skills. And this week I was at training on Friday and I learned about Mentimeter, which I've never seen before. I'm not very good with the computer, and I learned Mentimeter. So I was straight in on Monday morning. I said to the students, can you just indulge me in this? And the first question that I asked was, how have you developed your meta skills? So this was all the words that they came up with. Communication was top. Then they've got a lot of the kind of meta skills, but they've also got in it like empathy, consistency, teamwork, resilience. So they've used lots of different words. And then my other question was about the benefit of having the wall display, and that one just kept going. They kept adding and adding and adding to that. They really agreed that they did think that the wall display made a huge difference, because sometimes they would look on, they maybe weren't sure what integrity meant. So having a look at what other people have developed under integrity gave them, oh yeah, I've done that as well. Yeah, is that what integrity means? Oh yeah, I've definitely done that, and I've had the chance to develop that. So having the wall display there has been a huge benefit for our students. And every Monday morning when they first come in, we do a little soft starts. I usually do like Motivational Monday or Mindfulness Monday for the first like 20 minutes, half an hour, and they're looking at the thinking about for the last week, what have you done in placement, what have you done at home, what have you done in your part-time job, what kind of college work have you done, and have you managed to develop anything and add it to the wall. So every Monday morning we get a wee flurry of extra like raindrops on our wall this year. So, and then my last little slide is just a wee bit of feedback that we got about the next gen from practitioners. So some of the feedback was that learners are better prepared, and meta skills allow learners to develop their skills and raise their awareness. And then some of the learner feedback, so from the students, meta skills can be applied to their placement, and they regularly record progress, and whole qualification grading is better reflection on their performance. So that's me, and thank you so much for listening.
Hello everyone, thank you very much. I'm going to talk a wee bit about our approach, and I presented this last week to colleagues in Moray, and when I originally titled the presentation it was going to be an input on our approach to profiling, but as I was pulling everything together I really realised that what we had was an approach to meta skills rather than profiling. And I'm just going to talk a wee bit about what that looked like. So I'm presenting on behalf of Speyside High School, which I had just left. Well, I took a secondment at Christmas time, which has since become permanent. But my colleague Helen Duffy, she is still running our meta skills approach at Speyside High School, and she unfortunately could not join us tonight. So a wee bit about our context. So Speyside High School is in Aberlour in Moray, up in Whisky Country. So we're kind of slap bang in the middle between Inverness and Aberdeen, but just a wee bit further south, and it's its own little microclimate. It is a small rural secondary school with a roll of approximately 380 young people. And we have a really vast geographic catchment, so it runs from Rothes all the way to Tom and Towel. I was told at one point in time that it was the largest geographic catchment in Scotland. I never fact checked that, and I've just kind of accepted that, but it is a very beautiful area of the country. We were recently inspected, so we had an inspection in December, which was a lovely parting gift for me, and part of that inspection was looking at our approach to meta skills, and I've just put up the two kind of comments that were in the report around about meta skills on the slide there. So both the broad general education and the senior phase have an essential focus on plans to develop employability and meta skills. Almost all subject departments engage well with external partners to support citizenship and employability activities. Senior leaders have introduced a meta skills progression framework across the school. While this is at an early stage of implementation, it provides a clear structure for developing skills across learning. Senior leaders should continue to work with staff, pupils and partners to embed this framework fully into curriculum planning. And what I'll do is I'll kind of give you a glimpse of what that progression framework looks like, because it was based upon the Skills Development Scotland Meta Skills Progression Framework, but we kind of customised it and made it our own. So there were a few different parts to our approach to the meta skills at Speyside High School. One of them was our profiling, which was built on Google Sites, but the rest of it was about our collegiate approach and getting departments on board with meta skills and taking ownership of that, and then also bringing that out into our associated schools group, working with our primaries. So we chose to take a profiling approach on Google Sites, mostly because the My World of Work profile wasn't there at the time. And if it had been there, you know, after seeing it today, we probably would have started there rather than building our own platform. We did look into existing skills tracking platforms and profiling platforms like Unifrog, but we decided that we wanted to create something of our own that we had our full control over, so that it fit our processes and our systems, rather than trying to adapt what we wanted to do to an existing platform. So we chose Google Sites because it was flexible and it was basically a blank page. We also picked that because it was super easy to use. Young people could just drag and drop things onto the page and build that website visually. There was no need for them to have any coding skills, but they are developing other skills like their ability to present information. We also picked it because it was behind the glow walled garden, so it was secure. Young people would have to actually turn on the ability for the wider public wild west of the internet to be able to see their profiles outside of Glow, which was something we made sure to talk to them about and also let parents know about. Also, it was really quick to make changes to their profiles. and quick to administer those. So I'm going to actually show you one just now. So I've left this in the presentation, just a couple of screen captures, but there should also be a link for anyone who's viewing it after the fact. And I'm going to really try my best to get onto that now. And hopefully you actually see the live website now rather than, I think Tom's nodding there. So rather than just the screen share. So this is the example, and it is not a pupils one. I didn't think I would be right today, particularly because I'm not at that school anymore. So this was one we made up as an example for my colleague Helen Duffy, and they all kind of follow the same sort of layout with a kind of landing page where young people would tell them a bit about themselves, their interests, but it would also have that meta skills framework on the front page as well. And we really encourage young people to customize these and make them their own and show off their personalities on them. And it was dead easy to do that through Google Sites. As young people were building up their profiles, and we did that in, we had one period a week called Universal Pupil Support, UPS, and that fell on a Monday period one. And at first, that was where young people built and maintained their profiles. And each week they were coming in and adding evidence to their profile under one of the skills headings. So the only one that's actually active on this demo one is the communicating skills. So if I click on that, it takes them to the communication page. And the idea behind this was that they would add rich evidence to their profile. So for example, that's an embedded PowerPoint, and we can go into that and look at the different slides within it. Now, it's not a real PowerPoint, but that kind of justifies the point. Then they would write a small blurb about how that had helped them develop their meta skills, which they would co-create with their teacher after getting feedback from them. I've got this music video over here, Father Son, really great Glasgow band. If you haven't heard them before, I would really check them out. It's not made in our school, but it was just to kind of show the example that you could put videos on there and have that sort of rich content available within their meta skills profile. One of the things we were going to do was skills badges, but we didn't quite get that far with our approach, but it was maybe a next step that we were going to get to, like awarding badges when we feel that young people have been demonstrating that skill at the second level or the third level or the fourth level, and that was going to be tied into our progression framework, but again, haven't quite got that far. So I'm going to switch back to the presentation just now, hopefully. We all get dead good at presenting online during COVID, but I've kind of lost those skills now. So hopefully you can all see my presentation again. Yeah, perfect. So I've got another example of evidence, and this is real pupil evidence this time. So this was a picture of a young person's English grid where it looks at their E's and O's in literacy, I think. It just said, in English, I've achieved level 4 in group discussion, should be the 4th level. Which has strengthened communication skills out with the classroom. I'm able to confidently start and continue conversations within certain topics given to me, and this will help me in future jobs by communicating with my peers. I am able to use appropriate language whilst discussing with my peers and keep a conversation going. Now, obviously, I think that's a really good example, and you know, the evidence that young people were putting on their profiles was quite varied. That was a good example, but because the young people were making themselves, it varied in content, and yeah, so that was a good example, but not all of them were that strong. One of the big things that I think was really successful with our meta skills approach at Speyside High School was this idea that departments were adopting meta skills. So rather than saying that every department had to try and work on all of the meta skills at once, departments were focusing in on what they felt were the core meta skills for their subject area. So each department selected 2 to 4 meta skills and mapped these across their curriculum plans and shared that on the whole school map as well. Most departments then ended up creating descriptors of what each skill would look like at the 2nd level through to 4th level. And that was matched to our whole school approach for learning and teaching, which was called the Speyside Way, where we stated how success criteria should be structured, and that we used I can statements to do that. We built this around SDS's existing meta skills progression framework, which was a really useful starting point, but departments felt they wanted to articulate what those skills would look like in their own setting and be more tied to their own curriculum skills as well. So what that ended up being was a massive spreadsheet with every department, and I have put an example which I've filtered just to have the skills from English. So they selected focusing, communicating, creativity and critical thinking. And then they created between 1 and 3 descriptors for what that skill would look like at each level. So at the second level and then at the third and fourth level. I've only captured the first descriptor for each one on that slide, but I'll give you a good idea of what they would look like. So for focusing, I can look at different sources of information at the second level, but then at third and fourth level, I can look at different sources of information and choose the most useful pieces relevant to more complex tasks, organising the information into a relevant. That's cut off. I'm assuming it said something really important there. But what we then used those for was to create department resources. So every department got a set of flashcards. I know that's something that SDS have got their own version of for their progression framework as well. But these ones were created with their own descriptors from that Speyside High School progression framework we generated. They also got a set of A3 posters to put up in their classroom with their own meta skills descriptors on them as to what that skill would look like. And they also got PowerPoint slide inserts in that jazzy meta skills format with, you know, the borders around it, just so there was a consistent approach. And every time they saw that border around the school, they knew that they were looking at something to do with meta skills. And I think that visual language was really important for embedding that and for young people to get used to seeing, oh, that means I'm looking at my meta skills just now. We also use the iconography that comes with the meta skills within our PowerPoints as well. So the department resources were one of the big successes at getting that embedded into the general day-to-day discussions which are happening in the classroom, because I think part of the power of this approach was not that we stood up at in-service and said, right, we're going to do meta skills now, so everybody has to have meta skills in their lesson. It's about making that happen day-to-day and be normal and be part of the routines that happen within classrooms, so that young people just get used to, this is something we do and this is something we talk about. Now, I've skipped ahead because this slide's out of order. So we also had an approach with our associated schools group, so our primary schools within the Speyside ASG. We wanted to make sure that meta skills were embedded throughout young people's journeys through the school in our ASG. We had our own skills framework in Moray for a long time called the Moray Skills Framework, but the big success was getting everybody moved across to meta skills. And we decided the first year that we were doing the profiling to try and get the primaries involved with that. And that sort of snowballed into everybody doing meta skills and everybody starting to do the profiling at an earlier stage in primary. So the first year we invited P7s who were transitioning up to Speyside High School to come up to the high school, I think around February time, in order to make their skills profiles with me. Those lucky little darlings, they got to spend the whole morning with me playing with Google Sites. And we managed to do that for every single primary 7 class that was coming up. So the idea behind that was also to train the teachers and get them a wee bit confident in using Google Sites as well, because not everyone was familiar with that. And the bonus was they went back and they were talking about meta skills profiles at their school, talking to colleagues about that. Following on from that, we did a training session and produced a set of training resources so that primary colleagues were able to create their own profiles at their school level with their lower classes. And I think it's happening from primary 5 upwards now. So that's an example of the training resources we made. So again, that jazzy, familiar format with the border, everything having that shared visual language. It was a step-by-step process of how to do it. It had animated slides in it, like almost as screen captures, videos of how to do each bit. So that we were confident that everybody was doing it the same way and the quality of the profile was the same and everything was quite uniform, and there was nowhere to go wrong with that. Feedback from staff was really good, particularly around that focus on a small number of skills rather than trying to focus on absolutely everything. Working with the ASGs, so S1s came up with a basic profile was positive the first year. It meant people were ready to go as soon as they arrived. What we found was that the broad general education was super engaged with meta skills, but not so much the senior phase. And I think we all know that in the senior phase, there's a lot of focus on that assessment at the end. So maybe there's not as much scope or room for teachers, or maybe they don't feel like they have as much scope or room to talk about meta skills within their senior phase classes. We did notice that young people were more familiar with the meta skills language. They were able to articulate it. Some of the primary school young people were coming up with fantastic grasps of what words like integrity meant, and I thought that was fantastic. And staff found the support resources very helpful as well. We also made use of the embedding skills audit tool. Now, this was my colleague Helen that ran all of this, but when we completed that, we felt we were at the embedding stage of our meta skills journey and not quite at that mainstream yet. So we used that, the self-evaluation tools provided through the embedding skills audit tool at an in-service to review our progress and to measure the impact of our meta skills approach at the school. There are a few caveats to our approach now. So when we started this journey, young people were allowed phones in school, but we've now got a phone ban across all Moray schools, which has been massively positive for so many reasons. But our approach kind of relied on young people having access to devices. We had some devices within our school, but not a whole lot. We bought hundreds of USB cables as well. They're now just sitting in a box. So that has been tricky. So we're finding ways around that, which looks more like teachers getting the limited iPads that we have and taking lots of pictures and things like that to get evidence on to their profiles. We had some connectivity issues as well. So working with Google Sites required internet access, which we didn't always have, being a small rural secondary. And that middle leadership buy-in was essential to driving that through departments. So if you don't have middle leaders on board with embedding meta skills within your department, you're going to find that quite difficult. Our profile was very difficult to make hard copies of from Google Sites. I've seen a demonstration of the My World of Work profile. It makes beautiful little printouts, and I'm so jealous of that. And equally, it's very difficult for us to do any robust analysis on the scope of young people's skills from their Google Sites profiles, which I know the My World of Work profile links to the participation portal, and that looks really good, to be honest with you. So next steps for Speyside High School, I'm not there. But this was what we were thinking about on our school improvement plan, was embedding those skills within the senior phase, producing further support resources, and then potentially looking at the My World of Work profile and where it fits into this workflow. But that's for them to do, not for me. So thank you very much for listening to me today. Happy to take any questions, but thank you.
My name's Andrew Hislop, I'm a head teacher in South Ayrshire. I've got two small rural schools, which are Carmichael and Straighton, and we are part of the Carrick Cluster of schools. And so what I thought I would try and do today is give you a wee bit of, as brief as I can, just give you a wee bit of context to how we got to where we are today, because we're sort of 5 years, similar to Leanne, 5 years into our sort of meta skills journey, with the meta skills themselves only sort of coming on the last couple of years. So the work that we've been undertaking probably started post-COVID, and that was due to the context within our cluster at that point. There was a couple of new head teachers, both in the primary and the secondary. The academy itself was being demolished from the one that you can see there, and there was a nice fancy new school being built. That meant that there was two of the primary schools were merging into becoming one big primary school. And as I've got into details there, there are 7 primary schools involved within the cluster, most of which, other than the main big one, are all rural schools. So it's quite a diverse little cluster of schools, and as I say, there was a lot of change at the time, and so naturally, post-COVID, trying to get people back together and so on, and thinking how we could move things forward when we were all sort of new to the cluster. It gave us a nice platform just to think, right, what do we want from our schools. What do we want to see in the North Carrick area? So sort of, as I said, it's a 5-year journey. The first year was mostly about pulling staff together. You can see that's a stock photo, but none of us looked that happy at work. But as I say, the working parties were huge for us in that first year, because it was, I say, post-lockdown and that sort of stuff, and it was to allow collaboration, people to sort of come together, which was the sort of trigger on how do we work together more closely moving forward, because staff really enjoyed those opportunities working across the different sectors. And something that we were speaking about at the time between myself and some of the other head teachers was the sort of purpose of education. The Making Thinking Visible, MTV, was something that some of us had experience of, and when we spoke about it, it was something that we felt would give us a sort of platform to shift pedagogy. I would say there was a sort of collective frustration, I would say, with the education system at the time, due to the challenges that we'll all have been faced and feeling. We felt there was an opportunity to shift our understanding in the pedagogies, and MTV, as I said, sort of became that original vehicle. So just trying to develop thinking skills within people rather than just, as it was mentioned, I think Sharon spoke about it, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail later, was about that spoon-fed culture. And that was something that across the schools we were sort of keen to change. Next year, we introduced CERC, or we were CERC funded as part of a cluster programme of schools. Science itself felt like a natural progression from the MTV, so the Making Thinking Visible, developing cultures of thinking within the schools. Science seemed like a natural vehicle to progress that, because the focus through CERC was all about developing curiosity. And again, the idea started from the early years, so with early years staff involved, primary and in the secondary. And what we're starting to find as we develop these resources across the different sectors, was that, again, it was the collaboration, the natural smoother progressions and transitions between each of the early years to primary and to secondary. And the staff were enjoying, again, that collaboration, working together. And ultimately, the pupils were getting more opportunities to work together, and there was a clearer pathway for them going through, as I say, through the different sectors. That sort of the meta skills, I think at the time we were becoming more aware of it, the conversations, and through our own different research and reading and so on at that point, towards the end of 23, 24, that would have been. We agreed that the meta skills was something we wanted to know a bit more about. We were in touch with Jen, who is on the call today. Jen was vital in helping us sort of develop that at the beginning of last session. She was involved in a few different training sessions that we ran for everybody from early years, primary and secondary. And again, it was about how do we enhance this this wider understanding of skills, how do we continue to allow people opportunities to work together. And as I said, the most important thing for us was the sort of buy-in that we had. So the meta skills, they gave us that framework to sort of underpin a lot of the conversations that we were having. Those conversations were about how do we start to celebrate not just the learning, i.e. how well somebody is successful a learner is, how well they're attaining, but all those other qualities. And so, as I said, the meta skills became something that we could build that around. And what we noticed was the shifts in pedagogy that were starting to materialise last year. That brought us to this session, again building on the fact that we'd done science previously and we were seeing some success with the transition process there. We managed to fund a PE teacher who has spent the entire session this year working around all the cluster primary schools with some of the earlier staff as well, and so has developed a clear pathway of learning experiences from early years through into the secondary with clear skills. The whole thing has been skills based, relating to the meta skills, but also particular skills related to PE and sports. And again, that's been very well received by staff. There's been opportunities to upskill staff. And again, similar to the science, what we're seeing is a shift in pedagogy and a greater understanding from all staff around about how we're bringing learning to life, how we're starting to underline those other qualities that are within our learners. And then the other thing there is the embedding meta skills, which has been continuing to grow this year. So built on last session's inputs with Jane, and I suppose it was sort of, last year was a wee bit about the why of the meta skills, but we've really developed that this year through a meta skills working party. So we've started 4 main working parties this year. We've had the PE one, we've had the science and numeracy one, and then we've had this meta skills one, which has sort of underpinned everything. And it's again, we've just put a staff survey out last week, and the feedback's been really positive. The staff are really enjoying the opportunities to work across primaries, to work across sectors, and the benefits that have been felt by the young people as well, because we're now starting to see the meta skills being discussed regularly throughout learning experiences, and I think that's been the biggest thing. It's been a shift in habit. So we were very keen at the beginning of this journey that we didn't want meta skills to be, they weren't ever going to be an add-on. They were to be something that we're going to, your practice doesn't have to change, is the sort of message we were giving our staff. It's about how can you start to highlight whenever you're developing meta skills or raise the awareness of them throughout the learning experiences that you're already offering. But the benefit of that process has allowed staff to shift their pedagogies, and they're naturally starting to think, well, how can I further develop the meta skills through this learning experience, and how can I make it more active and bring it to life? So that's sort of where we're at just now. As I said, I've went through that fairly quickly. I know that Marc and Leanne give you a lot of examples. One of the examples that I'm going to show you, I put that transition slide on there because I think that's important. Is that we worked really hard on the transition stuff. We spoke to partners, we spoke to parents, and most importantly the pupils about what transition should look like through the Carrick Cluster, and that's the sort of P7 into S1 part. But all these, I'm just giving you little snapshots of things so that I can share these wider if they're of any interest. But as I said, I wanted to show you a couple of examples of different things. So we've got an event coming up next week, which is a careers event. So it's just to show you how this has developed into an event that we're doing just now, and how we believe that the staff, the pupils, and the partners and the agencies that we're working with are all starting to live and breathe the meta skills, and trying to add, I suppose, the value to them. So the event next week, we've got 15 different employers arriving, and this is for our primary 6, 7s and S1s from all the schools. They're all going to Carrick Academy. I don't know how clear that will be on your screens there, but essentially we've made them a workbook. As part of the workbook, we've given that to the employers that visit us, so they're going to highlight the meta skills that are relevant to their work, and the pupils are going to note them down as they're going through the conversations. But what we're keen to do is to make it the following bits important So the profiling has been a huge thing, and that's something that the Meta Skills Working Party have developed this year. So we use Seesaw throughout the primary school up to sort of primary 6 at the moment, where we're introducing the My World of Work tool, and then that's then taken on into the secondary. But this is the first year that we've introduced that, and so it's very early days, but we're starting to see the benefits of both for our young people and the staff, trying to identify the skills and the progression within them, but also for reporting to parents. And again, coming back to that, starting to highlight or celebrate the successes of the totality of a young person, and not just within their attainment, those wider skills and abilities that they have. Then it's been easier for us to highlight them through their experiences and through the skills profiles. So the reason we've put that in at the end there is because what we're keen to do is using the My World of Work stuff, like so the Animal Me quiz, and using the My Strengths, is starting to actually get something tangible for the young people to say, look, here, this is who I am, this is the qualities I've got. Then I've got the chance to meet and see employers, and this is the sort of skills that they're looking for in their workplace. And so there's a bit more depth. And so everything that we're trying to do, we're trying to add that sense of purpose. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, so I'm going to try and move on a wee bit. But this is the bit that I love. This is the bit I'm passionate about. Is giving that sense of the why for this. Very briefly, I said I get into education because I wanted things to be different. Through my own school experience, and through the fact that I've got 3 young boys who are, 2 of them are neurodiverse, and I'm passionate about how we can change schools to make it better for our young people. And furthermore, I said the fact that I've always got into this job because I think we can do this better. As in my school experience got me to where I'm today, but it never lit me up, it never excited me. And this sort of stuff does. How can we make things better? How can we make things, how can we bring change? And I think we're in a great place to do that just now with the curriculum improvement cycle. And so that's what a lot of our energy has been spent as head teachers and with our staff and with our parents and with our pupils about the why to the meta skills. And so I want to try and give you a wee few minutes just on the context of that just now, if I can. So if we look at we talk about the 4 capacities, which I would never argue with. I think they're great, but I think the focus has always been for me, as I said, that successful learners element and not celebrating those other areas that we've got within our young people. So we developed a cluster improvement plan to keep us right with the sort of stuff that we're doing. So I'll show you a wee page from that. And then I was involved in an Education Scotland think piece, which actually, interestingly, again, some of the questions that Sharon had asked, and some of the points that Marc was making about that senior phase, we explored in detail through that think piece. So influencing the vision for the Carrick Cluster, again, we're really keen to make sure that this is literature based and that there's reasons behind what we do and why we do it. I highlighted just there on that page just about the staff. So 100% of staff, this was from a recent survey, agree that the cluster vision of developing more skills-focused pedagogies and experiences, and 65% of them strongly agreed with that. So we've got an entire, we've got a motivated workforce that are passionate about making change, developing skills, changing pedagogies. As I said, I think it's important that the curriculum improvement cycle has been given as the platform that we can hopefully move on now to with that. They were very keen to continue collaborations, and so that's something that we're going to continue to build on next session. So the think piece that was involved in, so that again, just trying to underline some of the purpose behind all this. The inspiration for the inquiries I've highlighted there. A group had a collective cross-sector frustration with the current curriculum, and most importantly the measures. So the perceived measures of success It's not just their ability to read, write and count. Of course, they are vital, but it's those other qualities that our young people have, and how do we start to celebrate them? And that's always going to be challenged in a current system with high stakes exams and ESOL data that's continually asked of us. We've done loads of research. We've done countless interviews with various high-profile peoples from the world of education in Scotland and internationally, industry and wide and so on. So highlighted just a couple of the points. What I would say is the best answers we got about this. Why do we need change? You know, why is it important that we start to look at skills and people and who we are? Came from the pupils themselves. So a couple of important ones there was a leader, a director from industry, who really focused on the fact that our young people that are coming through the system as it stands at the moment are ill-equipped to cope with the workplace. We believe that the more they know themselves through developing their understanding of meta skills, the better equipped they will be when they arrive in the workplace. Whether the idea is going to university, an amazing conversation we had with an admissions tutor, she had highlighted about the importance of skills development through schools and moving away from that spoon-fed exam system that we've got. She highlighted a study that's just been completed that showed that their students coming from international or other curriculum, whatever, they had a skills profile or skills background to it, and they had some sort of skills passport that they could show, and it wasn't just their end-on qualifications. Those students from those countries are performing consistently better at university, whereas the ones that were performing less well were from countries with high stakes exams at the end. So again, I know that I might be preaching it inverted here, but just continue underlining that need for why the meta skills are so important, because it gives us a platform to understand more about a person than maybe an exam does. I say that in the last one there with the student, we don't know exactly how jobs do it, but it seems like they watch how people work together and handle problems. Maybe we could do more of that in school, like real life tasks that test how we think and act and not just what we know. So again, coming back to the pedagogies and things that we're starting to see changing across our schools as a result of a meta skills focus. It's developing understanding for the young people, and it's helping staff challenge how they're what kind of learning experiences that they're offered. So the last page there, the recommendations that our think piece drew together was that we need a radical rethink the entire curriculum and how success is measured within it. And that was something that I said, that was a number of head teachers involved in that. But what I thought was so interesting was essentially we spoke about the self-management, how getting young people how to self-manage, how to help them work with others, and how to help them solve problems was sort of what we drew from all the information there. And essentially that is the meta skills. And that's what we talk about across our cluster of schools within it's trying to simplify it, especially for our younger learners in the early years and so on. We're talking about how do I look after myself? How do I get to know myself? How do I work well with other people? And how do I solve problems? And the meta skills, as I said, gives us that framework for us to build on. And it's something that, as I said, continue to say, it's continue to impact the pedagogies and so on across the schools. I'm aware of time, so if I can come out of this, let me see if I can stop sharing. I know I'm trying to give a sort of whistle-stop tour of kind of what we've done. But if I can try and, as I said, there's loads of stuff ongoing in behind all that. Like I said, the events that we do, there's the working parties has all been built around developing skills and so on, how we're starting to self-assess them and all. There's loads going on underneath all that. So I know it's about 10-15 minutes to try and throw that at you. But if anybody wants to know more about it, I am absolutely love a Canva. I've made a million of them. I'm happy to share everything that we've created, any links to documents or whatever, resources, Microsoft Forms, whatever it might be that will help you embed this or help you know a wee bit more about it. I'd be more than happy to share them.